All right, good evening. Welcome to the Finance Committee. Tonight is February 24th, 2021. We have 7 items on our agenda, and we're going to go a little out of order first. We're going to pull up and have first the Joint Public Safety Facility presentation, the whole project presentation. And Ed Kazanovich is going to take care of that for us.
So thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for members of Tecton to join us tonight and make a presentation that culminated over a number of months that was done by the Public Safety Advisory Committee. They have made a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, and we wanted to bring you up to speed as to what the project entails and identify a calendar of events that would unfold leading up potentially to a debt exclusion vote that would go to the voters sometime in late summer. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John. Did you make Tecton a member as a presenter?
Which person is that?
So Matt, are you presenting or?
Yes.
Okay.
Matt, you are all set.
Thanks, John.
Here we go.
Okay, how's that?
Good.
That's good.
Thank you to everybody. We have a lot of material to cover here. There's been a lot of work done over actually the past couple of years with the town. Go through this study, identify some of the needs and problems with each facility in each department, and come to an ultimate determination of what the advisory committee has deemed as appropriate course of action moving forward. So I have a number of slides here. I'm going to try to move through them quickly. If I'm moving too fast, just let me know, and if you need me to go back and explain it. So we're going to go over a number of items here. The first is an overview of the findings of the study. Just around the conditions, why the existing facilities no longer serve the needs of each of the departments or the town. Then we're going to look at some trends in modern public safety facility design to get a sense of what we have now and what other communities have with some of their new facilities. We're going to talk about the advantages of department consolidation. We're going to review a couple of the identified sites that we have tested, just 3 of them, and we reviewed several dozen sites in town for their appropriateness. And then we're going to look at the opinion of probable cost for the facility, cost comparisons of other similar sized facilities in the Commonwealth. We're going to do a quick overview on construction cost escalation. And then we're going to look at 2 recent projects in Massachusetts that went in front of their respective communities for approval. One that went well, one that didn't go so well, and talk about why those occurred. And then we can open it up to some discussion. So we have 3 existing public safety facilities: the police headquarters, fire headquarters, and then fire station number 2, the substation. Each facility has their problems currently. They're aging facilities, and they have a number of site constraints, as well as construction issues that hamper the ability for the departments to perform their services adequately and safely. And we'll go through those, starting with the police headquarters. So just real briefly, this was the original police headquarters. It was opened in 1970. Just off Southbridge Street. In 2000, they moved to the new facility. facility, and And one thing to just point out quickly is that you'll see in some of these slides as we go through the existing building and some of the new public safety designs is that, judging by these photos, technology has certainly changed. That has a big impact on a public safety facility in a police station, especially when it comes to the dispatch center, the retention of records, in the way the facility operates. So this isn't too long ago, and the way they look currently is significantly different. So again, it was opened in 2000, and one of the biggest issues is that the station was built to a budget, but not necessarily to the needs of the department, with an outlook on the future growth within the town of Auburn. And so it was really undersized the day that it opened, and they were quickly running out of space and are quite over their limit as they currently sit. Since 1991, there has been a 330% increase in staff. So
Unmuted.
when the station opened, it was clearly undersized at the time, and that's only continued to get worse as time has gone on. You can see the number of staff that there was in the department in 1991, and this long list of additional divisions and staff members, both civilian and police staff. So this is just a quick overview of the police station now. You can see by these aerial photos that one thing that's overgrown its boundaries is parking. Parking constraints are tight. It's a long, narrow site. And there are just more staff vehicles and more parking spaces, and that doesn't really allow for the public to also park here. So you end up having a lot of overflow parking across the street and people crossing the road back and forth.
Jesus Christ.
That causes a little bit of a safety issue and a response issue in case any of the officers need to park here and get quickly to their cruisers and out on the road. The lobby is very tight and constrained. There's a lot of interaction that goes on in a police station lobby. You can have sex offenders coming in the register. You can have individuals that are applying for restraining orders, children being exchanged between their divorced parents, with needles and drugs and things like that, making records requests, and then coming in for training and other meetings as well. And so this little space isn't really conducive to having all those different people that you typically want to have in separate environments, or at least with a little bit of breathing room, so that this business can be conducted safely. And just to note that not everybody goes to a police station, but yours sees about 8,000 visitors annually. So there is a lot of public coming in and out of this lobby. Dispatch center. So the station was originally designed for one dispatch position. At the time of the study, two, and it was being increased to three. So you have three dispatch positions currently. And there's a lot of technology to go into this. Not only overseeing the entire public safety staff in dispatching for operations, but also a lot of the safety and security throughout the town, as well as taking all the calls. And these dispatchers see about 5,000 calls just to October in 2019 when the study was conducted. So more than that, and you can see year over year that volume has increased. And on average, in addition to emergency calls, see another 36,500 calls on average annually for the business line. There's also specific requirements for the security of the operations of the emergency communication centers. Basically, in times of a natural disaster or major event in town, this is really the area that needs to be the most protected, because that's where all the communications are going, so making sure that first responders are building to all those emergency communities.
Muted.
Records retention. Records are always increasing, and records are governed by statute within Massachusetts, and so a lot of those need to be kept on file and paper, and those increase over time, and you can see the volume that's here, and that will always increase. And that's overflowed into other storage facilities throughout the building. Also, evidence storage. Again, a lot of that is covered by statute, so a lot of these evidentiary materials need to be been stored for 7, 15 years indefinitely for some of those for outstanding cases. So this is another area of the building that quickly becomes overrun because it just continues to increase as it increases too. And this also needs to really, this is a lot of sensitive material for ongoing cases that need to be in controlled environments. This being on the lower level of the police station right now is subject to a lot of moisture issues. They're occurring in this building. There's not a good treatment of the vapor barrier between the slab and the ground, and so there's a lot of moisture going through this lower level of the building. In fact, in this previous slide, there's an industrial dehumidifier running constantly to deal with humidity issues down here. Staff facilities, there's not enough lockers for the staff. These lockers typically in modern police departments are a lot larger than they are now, and there's just not enough space for the officers. And there's not enough diversity for the officers. There's no female staff come on board, there's not enough female lockers. Aging mechanical systems, and with this building, also renovation and taking pieces of this offline to make the necessary adjustments is a real challenge to keep operations moving. And these are some photos of the Sally Port. So this is where detainees are brought into the station and then brought into the prisoner processing area so that they can be processed from the station and then booked. And one thing you'll notice is there's a lot of storage going on in this space. And that's something that a detainee that's combative can grab a hold of. So it becomes a safety issue for the officers, as well as the structural columns that are coming down here that aren't allowing the doors and cruisers to open, which is an issue when we're trying to negotiate a detainee. And the overhead doors coming in here are sized for a vehicle, but they're not sized for an ambulance. And so if there's a medical emergency for somebody that's been detained, it's ideal that this ambulance is brought into the Sally Port, secured, and then the prisoner is brought into the ambulance and taken away. Right now, somebody would have to be taken out into the parking lot, and that causes a safety issue for somebody trying to escape or something else. And the prisoner processing area here in the booking cells, they're not up to Department of Public Health standards, and there's a lot of sharp edges and issues with some of the desks and the materials in the booking process. Fire headquarters, real quickly, again, staff and call volume have increased year over year. This shows the trend line from 2012 to now, showing increased call volume going to the fire department. This is for EMS as well. And call volume is directly correlated to staff and directly correlated to the number of apparatus needed to respond to these different calls. And so the need grows over time. The current fire headquarters opened in 1964. It's an aging facility that's been well maintained by the town, and it's been added on to as efficiently as possible, but it hasn't really kept up with the department. So a second story was added in 1995 by Baycott High School, and then the DPW renovated some of the facilities in 2017, but they're not really designed to the modern code standards that a fire station really needs to be built to in order to adequately perform their duty. And in fact, the second story is also not handicap accessible, which is a concern. Stations in the 1960s were built for a different type of apparatus. These were the fire trucks back then, and they're a lot smaller than they are today. They don't carry as much equipment. And so the current vehicles that respond out of the facility don't really fit within it. And it causes a lot of safety issues, moving between the vehicles when they're inside, and when the vehicles need to be maintained or serviced, they need to be brought out in order for those to occur. And there isn't enough room to store. You can see here some of the vehicles need to be stored outside as well. If they're subject to the elements, they deteriorate quicker. And this is just a number of the vehicles that need to be stored outside. And as we all know, that the staff parking is combined with the Goddard parking as well. So we really want to keep staff parking separate from the public. in these facilities. One of the biggest issues, though, with the headquarters when looking at renovation of this facility is that it's in a FEMA floodway, and the biggest issue with that is unless we were to reclassify this, working with FEMA, that any additions or renovations major to this facility would start to impact FEMA reimbursement to the town of Auburn. So it's really important that if we do anything major to this facility, that it's moved off-site and out of this FEMA floodway, because there is a risk that if we go for a reclassification that we may not be granted it and we may be subject to losing some FEMA reimbursements during natural disasters. The building itself, obviously, is also not adequate for what it serves. The lobby is only 42 square feet. It's really tiny. Like the police station, there's a lot of activities that happen in here through the public and the fire department interface. Conference spacing, there's only one small conference room. There's a number of different meetings and things like that happen between the different shifts in the different departments, especially now when you have fire headquarters and the substation. There's a number of different groups that need to meet and discuss things. There's no storage in the building. This is really the only main storage closet, and it's underneath the stair, which is actually a hazard, especially when it's the only main means of egress out of the second floor. And then you can just see here how tight it is inside of those bays between the truck. Actually, when you're trying to respond to an emergency as quickly as possible, and you're trying to get into one vehicle while the other one is trying to pull away quickly, it's quite a big risk to causing harm to one of your first responders, but it also hampers the response time in getting out of these spaces. And then adequate gear storage. We'll touch briefly a little bit later on about the well-being and safety of first responders due to carcinogens and things like that. But having adequate space to clean and dry the gear as they return from fires. There's no space available in these, so they're actually drying a lot of their gear after it's been washed right in the bays. And again, storage. This is a couple of the offices here that are in the apparatus bays, and just that little bit of ceiling space between the roof and the top of this is a small mezzanine that can be reached by this ladder, and that's where a lot of their overflow material is being stored as well. West Street, the substation, converted from so the apparatus bays here are in what was the old cafeteria, not designed to support the vehicle weight.
Thank you.
Being housed in there, and also just not designed to really support the function of the fire department. We do have a little bit more headroom, which is great, but again, the floor structure is not designed to support these apparatus, and there's again more equipment than there are bays in here, so you can see that some of the smaller vehicles, trucks, and things like that are actually being stored between the bay doors. So there's quite a bit of negotiating that would have to go on in terms of shuffling these around and responding to a call. Inadequate locker facilities. Men and women in this one share one locker room, so there isn't separate facilities for separate genders. And again, just storage space, workspace out here. This was actually a stage that they had just torn down while we were in the middle of the study to get additional storage. So that's a little bit of the existing conditions. Some modern facilities. This is a lobby in a police station, and it's important to have a lot of this open space to make sure that, again, all those different public groups that are coming in here are able to be separated out and dealt with in terms of bringing people in for interviews and things like that. So having a safe, clean, open space that allows the different functions to be dispersed is really important. Training facilities, emergency operations centers. There's specific requirements for an emergency operations center and how it gets configured and the different components that go into that. So making sure it's purpose-built, and when these things get modified over the existing spaces, it's really hard to adequately outfit them with the different technology and data that really need to be in the space. So when you build these from scratch, making sure that the flexibility is built into that and the adequate room is brought in is really important, as well as the training areas. The training room is fairly small in the police department now and has some acoustic issues. The International Association of Chiefs of Police has specific size requirements as well for how big these training facilities need to be and how many officers need to be in them. And in shared facilities, this can be utilized by not only the police, but also the fire department for some of their trainings, and can be available to the public as well. So this becomes a great space that everybody can come together, and it helps engage the public with these departments. Emergency Communications Center, the Dispatch Center, there's a standard for NFPA 1221 that sort of tells us how these need to be designed, but there's a lot of technology that goes into them. They, again, need to be really purpose-built and able to be changed and modified over time as standards and technology changes. When we did these 20, 30 years ago, the digital operations in the technology was not as it is today, and so it was never designed to have that sort of flexibility. And so you get really pigeonholed really quickly into these spaces, and because they're the central hub of these, they're typically in the center of the building, and allowing them room for growth and expansion just really isn't possible because of that. Offices, locker rooms, things like that. We saw the lockers before in the police station. Modern lockers are much larger. They have power in them so that officers can charge their radios, tasers, flashlights, things like that. And it also gives them adequate storage space for all their gear and equipment that they need to store. And they're also ventilated, so the existing lockers that you have aren't ventilated, so there's issues with moisture and things like that building up, which causes mold in spaces. So making sure that, again, everything's purposefully built for the use is really critical. Sally port, making sure that if we are storing stuff in there, that it's appropriately separated from the detainees that you're bringing in here, so that there's a safe transfer of prisoners into the facility and into the processing area. Not only is detainee safety important, but also the officers that are transporting those folks. And then proper evidence processing areas to make sure that evidentiary material is being taken from the crime scene and then brought in to a lab setting where it's processed and then stored properly so that the chain of custody is always intact and that material can be stored properly for prosecution of any cases in the future. And then proper detention facilities, making sure that they're designed to the current health standards in Massachusetts. Massachusetts has actually some of the highest requirements for the design of their detainee cells. And the main purpose of that is safety of the detainee. These aren't yet prosecuted. They're innocent until proven guilty. They need to make sure that they're safe during their detention in these facilities. And the first 24 hours of incarceration is the time when you're most likely to cause self-harm. So making sure everything is preventable for anti-ligature and everything is safe and secure and is very critical. Firefighter health and safety is really important. So when a firefighter is returning from a call, the soot and material that's on their turnout gear is always contaminated with a number of carcinogens. If you're responding to an old building structure fire, you might have lead and asbestos and things like that on you. And that all comes back to the fire station and sits in the apparatus and on the gear until it's clean. This is just a list of some of those carcinogens that might be on the gear as they come back, and first responder cancer rates are very high, especially after 9/11 when it was really prevalent about all the number of firefighters that were coming back with mesothelioma and lung cancer and things like that. So making sure that we have the appropriate facilities to clean and decontaminate that gear and the firefighters as they return, but also making sure that the spaces are designed adequate so that those carcinogens are kept into the hot zones of the building and not spreading themselves out throughout the rest of the facility through properly designed transition zones and HVAC systems that pressurize those separately from the occupied spaces are critically important. And these are some of those facilities. properly designed turnout gear storage, so when they need to respond to a call, that their gear is properly stored, easily accessible, and this is where it lives. It doesn't come back with them. It doesn't go into their offices. It stays in this area. When it comes back from a call, it goes into a commercial extractor that takes those carcinogens off. They're properly dried in these drying racks and then put back where they belong. So that way, none of this material is ever going into the rest of the building and keeping those hazardous materials separate. Resiliency. So making sure that especially with the dispatch center, that we're having a 72-hour backup system so that if there is a mass power outage, like we had just last year with the hurricane or a number of years ago with the October snowstorm, we can be without power for a long time even with our modern power grids. And emergencies happen during those times, and actually they happen a lot more during them. So we need to make sure that these facilities are up and operational so that our first responders can respond to the community and make sure that everybody is safe. These buildings also have higher structural requirements. The existing police station and your fire stations don't meet these enhanced structural requirements to make sure that during a natural disaster, that these are the facilities that are going to withstand the most severe of natural disasters. And with your fire headquarters, as an example, in a FEMA floodway, it is susceptible to flooding, and having that facility flooded out while emergencies are happening in town is also going to hamper the response. Consolidation. So there's a lot of facilities that happen in a fire station that happen in a police station. And by combining these into a single public safety facility, you're eliminating that duplication. Eliminating duplication, of course, saves money in the long run, both in maintenance but also in your upfront costs. Fitness centers, gyms. So fitness is an important part of the continuing process of being a public safety officer, and it's part of their testing criteria. So making sure that they have adequate training facilities, but also that they're combined into a single facility. Now you're not duplicating the equipment that goes into them, space, and the infrastructure associated with that. Training facilities, each one of these is going to have their own training facility, so consolidating those into a single facility eliminates the need for that. And there's a lot of AV and technology and costs associated with those. If they're consolidated into a single space, it saves a lot of money both upfront and in maintenance. Lobbies, public space, again, consolidating saves money, and as well as mechanical systems. The less systems you have, the less maintenance costs you have, and in over 10 or 20 years of the life cycle of those systems, replacing it once is a lot less expensive than replacing it 3 times over 3 separate facilities like we have. So now, just briefly on some of the test fits. So with the advisory committee, we've gone through several dozen test fits all over town to really determine the appropriate location for separate facilities and also a single joint public safety facility. And what we came down to is a number of critical criteria points that needed to be met in terms of creating what would be a single public safety facility. And we'll get into the costs of why that was ultimately the way that the advisory committee had voted, was to go down to a single facility. But the fire department is the one that typically is responding the most to a call out of the department itself. Most of the police officers are out on the road. So we wanted to make sure that if we were consolidating the fire department into one, that we weren't also reducing the service to the community in response time. If you're having an emergency, we don't want to have lengthen that because there's insurance implications and, of course, implications to the public health, because if you have an emergency, you don't want it to take a couple of minutes longer for them to respond to your emergency. So making sure that response time is not impacted with a single facility is critically the number one factor in determining where this goes, as well as the size of the site and the ability for it to grow over time as needed, but also to accommodate everything that we need now. So the first one is on South Bridge Street here. This is sort of at the edge of the main downtown corridor where the I-90 off-ramp is. there was an old hotel there that was going to become a Lowe's, so we called it the Lowe's site. And it provided adequate space, adequate response time, and it also gave us a pretty good way off the site for us to respond to and fit all the needs of the department and move the growth in the future. The second we looked at was where Shaw's currently is, in the back here. So this is actually pretty close to where the original police department was. But again, it provided adequate sizing. It was a little bit set back off of the main road, so you'd be responding through a site, which was a little bit of a concern. And so this wasn't the preferred site that the committee voted on, but this was something that sort of checked all the boxes. And then the third preferred site that we had looked at was where Sears Auto Center is. If we were able to get that parcel of land, would it be able to fit? And it does. And so we can provide all the services needed for a joint public safety facility here as well. This is just a brook that runs along Southbridge Street, so there would be a crossing that we'd have to deal with, but that's something that we could achieve. So now, real quickly, we'll go through the budget. And I should make one point. We presented this portion of the presentation a couple of weeks ago to the Board of Selectmen, and we want to make one correction. The values of the project costs that we presented at that were from last year, from the previous presentation to the Selectmen. And late last year, we had updated those to revise the escalation. So the values shown on this are slightly above what we presented a couple of weeks ago, but they were consistent with the last ones that we had presented to the committee because we did escalate as the project timeline had expanded from the study. So I just want to make that clear in case anybody was on that Selectman presentation. I apologize for that confusion. So our project costs associated with this are escalated in the spring of 2023. Those previous numbers that I had mentioned were 2022. And that's the assumed midpoint of construction, assuming everything sort of falls into place. And so the cost for a standalone police headquarters based on the program that was developed with the police department and presented to the advisory committee was running at around $23 million for that single facility. This is a new construction on a virgin site. Not site specific, so there certainly are some costs associated with where this is eventually gets situated, but this is the general cost based on a new site. Similarly with fire headquarters, the same thing, and the cost for a standalone facility was just over $18 million. And then for a substation to replace the West Station, would be just shy of $9 million. So if we were to build all these three buildings at the same time, it would be just over $50 million total cost. But we all know that three buildings probably wouldn't get approved and funded and constructed at the same time. They sort of stagger themselves to be subject to construction cost escalation over time. So the number would actually probably raise beyond what this $50 million number is. So we went back and we developed what it would take to combine all three of these buildings into a single joint public safety facility. And this is sort of the breakout of the conceptual design for that single facility. And it comes in just shy of $40 million. Again, the old number that I presented a couple of weeks ago was just over 30, escalated another year out. So the building itself is just shy of $35 million, and the total project will be just shy of $40 million. So when we compare those single facility costs versus the three separate facilities, it shows about a $10.5 million net savings in that consolidation, and that's the shared facilities that we'd be bringing together. And that's ultimately why the Public Safety Advisory Committee had voted that going with a single joint facility would make the most fiscal sense in town. It's a larger upfront cost for a single building, but ultimately, in the end, it made the most sense in terms of overall value to the town because it would provide all of the programmatic needs of all three facilities, but into a single consolidated. So this is, again, this is the old number, the $37 million, but this is sort of a comparison of other communities in the Commonwealth and their construction costs for some of the buildings. And what this basically, we'll put this together to demonstrate is that it's to note that population and town size doesn't dictate the size of a public safety facility. There's a number of factors that go into that. Call volume, the amount of traffic that's coming in and out from surrounding communities, a number of factors, but it really comes down to the amount of police and fire activity that's required based on these calls and staff size. And so from this, it just shows that we're sort of, this facility is sort of right in the middle of where you want to be, and it's efficient cost per square foot over its size. So construction cost escalation, we always hear that whenever we talk about these projects, and that's a factor that comes into play because the construction value of projects and materials and things like that doesn't keep consistent with. In fact, it typically outpaces inflation. This is a graphic that Turner Construction, a large international firm, puts together, and this is based on Massachusetts, its construction cost escalation, because regionally these things vary. It's a lot less expensive to build something down in the south than it is in New England. So what this is determined on is if we use a baseline of 1960 as a building costing $100 per square foot, it tracks the delta year over year and then applies that as the index. So you can see second quarter 2020, that $100 a square foot is, or $100 as a unit cost, is now a little over $1,100. So it just shows that the value of construction going up. But the one thing to really pay attention to is this delta here. And that's the change year over year of construction costs and how much the value of that project costs year over year. And saying inflation is approximately 2% year over year, you can see that on average construction goes up somewhere between 3.5% and 5%. Now, this being 2020 and a unique circumstance with the pandemic and a recession based on that uncertainty of the way that it's going to go, we can see that the market is starting to soften a little bit. So it does save us time in the fact that waiting on this a month or two will not have the same impact as it did, say, 3 years ago when escalation was very high. But if we take the average 3.5% per year on a $32 million construction, that equates to, on average, about an increase of $100,000 per month as a general rule of thumb. So this isn't as important, I think, for this presentation, but just a couple of projects that recently went in front of the voters. We recently presented the Shrewsbury Police Station, and that went in front of the voters with a dead override with the last election. $42 million police station, $5 million of that was for emergency communications upgrades in town. Sometimes it's good to couple these public safety projects with other infrastructure because sort of get more bang for the buck and you're upgrading all your systems simultaneously. They were seen, so the bond got approved on January 1st and went through, and they were anticipating a rate of somewhere between 1.6 and 1.9%. So bonding the project now versus 2 or 3 years ago, they were seeing a significant savings in their overall debt to the town. But what helped with the yes vote in town and getting the project approved, especially now when there's a lot of uncertainty and people losing their jobs with the pandemic and we don't know where the market is going to be in a year, they had a multifaceted community engagement with all the boards and committees within the town, and they also had unanimous support from committees and boards in the town. So everybody was on board with this. They all had approvals move forward with this on the record, and that ultimately led to a lot of faith in the taxpayers that the project would be executed properly and with fiscal responsibility moving forward. And they had a history of success in town, so that also helped garner that
Matt, do you mind, I'm sorry, through the chair, can I just jump in for 1 second? Matt, do you mind trying to wrap it up to whatever are the rest of the financial pieces? I'm just concerned about the time because we have a lot of other presentations. So I'm sorry, you're doing an awesome job. I don't
This is it. I can skip the next slide. I don't think it's important.
Oh, okay, because I know we were going to go into Charlton and all, but I think for the purposes of the Finance Committee, you've covered, you did a great job showing how we got to where we are, what the costs are, so that would be great. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm sorry, through the chair. Hi, Ann, how are you?
Good, hi.
So I'm sorry, I thought we should just maybe leave a couple minutes for any questions that
Unmuted.
Finance Committee may have.
Okay.
Of that. And I also want to note that Jeff McElfrey is on as well, also from Tecton, and just want to thank them. They've done a phenomenal job. And as you know, as the Finance Committee, we had approval from the annual town meeting a couple of years ago for $150,000, actually the fall town meeting, to do this study. So there's been a lot of work that's gone into this. Even with COVID, the work is still continuing. So I just wanted to mention that Tecton has done a great job. They can probably answer most of your questions. This is not the only time that we want to present this to you. The chair, we just wanted to let the committee know everything that we've been working on so far. And I also have to point out that Kevin Kennedy, who's on the Finance Committee, is the chair of the Public Safety Facilities
Muted.
Advisory Committee. And so Kevin has obviously been very active in this for the last year and a half, if not almost 2 years at this point. So we do have a lot of work ahead of us. Our next step after coming to you is to go to the public and just start having meetings similar to this. Excuse me. And ultimately, the next step is in order to get a site, we can't just go out and just make an offer on a site because we're a municipal entity. We have to follow Chapter 30B requirements. So we're going to put an RFP out, and the RFP will kind of identify the site criteria that we're going to have, the area that we prefer to have it in, as Matt showed you, and hopefully property owners will then respond to the RFP and present to us a proposal for purchasing their land. And that will give us what we need to have as far as final information on cost for land acquisition. Until that happens, we don't know what the land acquisition costs are. And then once we have that, we can develop our final budget and go to show the public what the full budget is, including the land acquisition and site development costs. And then our ultimate intent would be to ask the Board of Selectmen to vote to put this on a ballot question and have a special election likely at the end of September. And then based on the results of the debt exclusion, as Ed mentioned, at the September special election, we would then go to the fall town meeting in October, late October, say, for the authorization. So that's pretty much our timeline. Again, so this is not the only meeting, it's not the only opportunity. We can, Matt, if you're okay with it, we can get your full presentation, we can get that in a PDF, and Sharon, who's on the call, we can get that to the Finance Committee, because there was a lot of information in the tool. So we don't anticipate you to get it all tonight, but if you have it and you have additional questions, you can feel free to reach out to us, and we can either pass it along to the committee through Kevin or to the Tecton through Matt and Jeff.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks, Julie. That was a lot of information, that presentation. I mean, they've obviously put a lot of time.
Unmuted.
They've put a lot of time into that presentation, and and it was very informative. Thank you. Okay. I hope you can hear me. Can you? Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
I saw nodding heads. All right. Well, thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Any members of the Finance Committee have any questions?
I thought it was very informative. Oops, sorry, Ed. Go ahead. I was going to say, I thought it was very informative and Julie answered the question. I was wondering about if we could get a copy, so I think that's fantastic.
Okay.
My questions are not really for Tecton. They're more about just whether there would be other projects that we would want to include in this, like Shrewsbury, if we have other facilities that need upgrading or communications or whatever it is. So it doesn't need to be a tonight question. It's just generally.
Okay, I understand. Yep. Okay. Any other questions? I think we're all set then. Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation, Matt and Jeff, and we appreciate that we'll be able to get a copy of that and review it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll send that out first thing tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you both. You continue to do a great job for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So that was the item from the agenda, the Joint Public Safety Facility project. Now, the next item we're looking at in the agenda involves the Library, Goddard Park, and the Pedestrian Bridge project. Okay?
Sure, thank you. Through the chair, if John Korniak was on the call, he's our IT guy tonight. If John can make me a presenter, I can show you a presentation that I believe Sharon sent to you today. We'll try to go through it pretty quickly.
You're all set.
Great, thank you, John. Good job. All right, let's see. Here we go. So, I will just go through a couple things with you here. So, we have a new project that we're excited about. Ed and I have been working on this for a few months. And I just want to comment that Jean Collins, our library director, is on the call as well, and she's been extremely helpful to us in putting this together. So I'm just going to show you what the proposed project is, the estimated cost, and when muted coming. So very briefly, it's a proposed three-phase project. Number one, to install a sunroom type addition. You know, picture what a Brady room would look like. I don't mean to use the brand name, but that everyone recognizes that. A Brady type room, sunroom on the back of the library. And that would also, the second phase would be to do improvements to Goddard Park, which really needs a lot of work. And lastly, and most importantly, I believe, would be to construct a pedestrian bridge over the brook to physically link the library with Goddard Park. It's something that we don't have now, and we absolutely need to have. So the intent of this project is that the library addition, being a glass addition, would really open up the back of the library to the back part of their parcel. You'd be able to sit in that beautiful sunroom area and look out and see Goddard Park. You could see the pedestrian bridge, and it would provide opportunities for more programming for the library, whether it be programming on their own site, you know, maybe a garden, a walking trail, some, you know, we've talked about butterfly programs and outdoor programs for children, for adults. And it would also allow, with that pedestrian bridge, a link over to Goddard Park and the pond, which we would clean up, fix the pond, maybe put a fountain in it, and have some activities in the pond that could directly relate to the library, even as far as having, you know, small, you know, the electronic sailboats. So you can do a program on sailboats, and families can go and get the sailboats from the library and use them on the pond. And we want to see some major improvements in Goddard Park to bring it up to where it really should be, given all the work that's going on on Auburn Street. So just want to point out, I'm not going to go through these, but this is not a new concept. The idea of improving Goddard Park and linking the parcel to the library has been identified in numerous plans that we've done over the last 4 years. So what this is an implementation of the major strategic goals that we've put in each of those plans. I always like to mention what the fire chief says, and I know he was on the call, I'm not sure if he still is, but he says he sees people coming into the parking lot at the fire station looking, in his words, they look longingly over at the library and say, how do you get there? So there really is no way to get there technically from Drury Square without going out and about and around, and we're trying to change that. So this is all part of the broader vision for Drury Square. It ties in beautifully with what's going on Auburn Street, and it really makes use of our town assets. just want to show you, just so you can see, we have beautiful assets there, but they're underutilized, and again, they're not linked together. So it's critical to bring these two parcels together. As you probably know, this is a picture of Drury Square with the land use, and I think it's over 55% of the land use in Drury Square is municipal. So it's really critical that we maintain our facilities and that we provide physical and aesthetic links to each of our own municipal parcels in Drury Square. It will help with the overall economic development of the area, and it most certainly helps the library, as well as ties into the Auburn Street project. Again, I'm not going to go through these, but I will say that the library strategic plan, the master plan, the Drury Square plan, the economic development plan, every plan we have has talked about the need to link these two parcels. So we have an opportunity to do that now. Knowing that we were looking at this, we used one of our local technical assistance grants through the state to have CMRPC start to develop some design concepts for the redevelopment of Goddard Park. And I just, on the lower right here, just put one of the pictures just to see what a bridge would look like. Obviously, you know, it could be any style bridge, but it would be a pedestrian bridge. And if we do some bike trails or some walking trails, we can link those trails in and ultimately link it over to the bike and walking trails on Auburn Street. So this does tie into the Auburn Street project. You all probably know that that's underway. That's the reconstruction project on Auburn Street. Right here is just a map of the project area. And as you can see, the library is right there, and Goddard Park is right in the middle of it as well. We have a number of beautification aspects of the Auburn Street project that are going to be part of this project. So the total project cost is about $5.2 million, and that includes about $1.2 million of town funding into the project. That is, the remainder was funded by the state. Just a couple of the streetscape things that we're going to be seeing, and this was all approved by town meeting. You know, there'll be a gazebo, there'll be decorative lighting, there'll be banners, posts on the decorative lighting that we can hang banners on to better identify the area. And again, if we are talking about a public safety facility, which a lot of people obviously are going to ask this question, with the fire headquarters being in the midst of all of this, having improvements to Goddard Park and the library and adding a pedestrian bridge can only enhance the value of the current fire headquarters parcel in the future. This is just what some of the decorative lighting is going to look like there. So it's really going to be a nice area. If we don't do something to Goddard Park, it's really going to stick out because the rest of that area is going to be so beautiful. You don't want to leave that one very large site unattended. So we also have the Wayfinding Project that we just wrapped up. And as you can see, we've got new signage that was developed and a new logo that was developed that we can use. And that really is, it could be all tied in with this, the directionals, the signage. So that's just in summary what the project is. The total project cost that we've estimated on this is about $1 million. And Ed and I had the opportunity to present a concept and grant application, so to speak, to the Arthur and Martha Pappas Foundation. And we did so back in the late fall, and we found out at the end of January, after many meetings with the trustees and lots of great questions, that they approved a grant for us in the amount of $505,000. And the Pappas Foundation does require a match. So the match, they are looking to the town to provide the remaining $505,000 match for a total project cost of, again, $1 million, about a little over $1 million. The most expensive part of that is the bridge. So I'm just going to show you quickly. So here's the breakdown of the cost. The total sunroom cost would be about $310,000. This does not include any landscaping or any additional improvements to the outside of the library, which is something we're going to have to look at in the future. If you're going to have a beautiful addition where you want to bring the outside inside to the library, it's going to be important to have the outdoors be rejuvenated and have it look nice and have better trails that will lead you to the pedestrian bridge. I'll also tell you that the library director who's here will reiterate this, I'm sure, that the library can use some additional space. And by adding this space, the sunroom would be approximately 79 feet by 16 feet. So it's a good-sized addition. It's cost-effective to do this type of addition. we would save on some other elements. For instance, we wouldn't need to be replacing the windows on the back of the building if we did this. And it also would provide the ability for the library to actually start shifting some things around inside the current library, and maybe even expand the children's area, which is fairly small. So we are definitely in need of space in the library. The second part of this is the Goddard Park. This is the price that can fluctuate. Right now, we're estimating about $200,000. If we had $400,000, we could put $400 in. If we needed to cut it for any reason, we could cut it back and just remove some of the elements. But right now, what we're estimating is putting in a pedestrian walkway, ornamental lights, a new electric service, park benches, receptacles, relocate the model rocket to Goddard Park, really enhance the history of Auburn as being the first place for the liquid fuel rocket to be fired. And while that was actually done on the golf course, we know that there's a model rocket here in Goddard Park. And we really don't take advantage of that history quite as much as we should. We're also talking about fixing up the actual replica, the other replica rocket that used to have a fountain, and bringing that back to life and replacing the pumps there so that once again that can be all lit up and have a fountain. And the last piece of it is the most expensive piece, but again, this is the most critical piece, is that physical link between the two parcels. And this would be to construct the pedestrian bridge. The pedestrian bridge, one of the reasons it's so expensive is the topography is such that the library parcel and the Goddard Park parcel are not on the same level. So the engineering is going to be a little bit more complicated to put a bridge over it. And it also involves going over Dunn's Brook, which is it involves conservation and some additional measures that have to be taken when you cross the conservation. So the estimated total cost for that is $500,000. So there's your $1,010,000 estimated cost. And I'm going to turn it to Ed to show how creative we have been, and particularly Ed has been, to come up with the match for this project without incurring any additional cost to the taxpayer. So, Ed, I'm going to turn it to you. And John, if you can just leave it like this so Ed can still use the screen, that would be great.
Julie, thank you. And I just want to emphasize the fact that we try to put together a financial plan that wouldn't tax any of the residents as a result of this proposed project. So if you look at the top half of the page, these are currently available funds that are in place. Although it would require a vote at town meeting, these funds are available. And if you look from the sale of real estate down to the overlay surplus, that total is $406,381. The bulk of that would come out of our free cash, remaining 50% allowed under the policy. Mm-hmm. Our certification of free cash was a positive almost $2 million gain. If you use 50% of that, it was roughly $970,000. We appropriated $780, and a few others, leaving a balance of $147,000. So that is currently available. And we would ask the town meeting members for a one-time use of stabilization fund of $80. That would require a 2/3 vote. The next block down are unexpended bond proceeds. These are items that we already borrowed. They were intended for enhancements and a rehab of library windows, HVAC work, foyer work, interior paint. And there is a $30,000 consideration that the school department is willing to turn that back. They need to replace some windows at Randall on West Street. They don't want to do a full-scale project not knowing what the outcome of the public safety facility is going to be and whether or not they have an opportunity to move into the existing police station if a public safety facility is built. So we're trying not to spend any money on those buildings that may be repurposed, or they may relocate to another building. So if you add up all of these funding sources, it's roughly $503,000. Our match would be about $505,000. Certainly, we could utilize a small portion of state aid money after consulting with Gene to get to our $505,000. But certainly, we are going to propose this in the form of warrant articles and bring it to town meeting, at the annual town meeting, and you will be making a recommendation on these warrant articles for the upcoming town meeting. So what we may have to do in discussions with the Pappas Foundation, these funds would be distributed probably over a 3-year period. We do not have an agreement in place yet. So we may have to ask for a loan authorization for purposes of just going out for some short-term borrowing. It would be a ban. We're currently getting interest rates under 1% for short-term borrowing. At a maximum, if we borrowed $500,000, which we know we're not going to need, on an annual basis, if we went out for 1 year for $500,000, it's only $5,000. So that's very manageable. We don't expect it to be that great if we need it at all, but we need to have that in place, so that would be another warrant article. So that basically is a summary of how we would finance our share. These numbers may change slightly, but this is what's in place right now, and we'll work to get you something when the warrant closes. So, Julie, I'll turn it back to you. That's the summary of the financial plan.
Great, thank you. So that's what we wanted to present to you. We wanted to let you know what we were working on. Similar to the fire station project, I think this is a project that will really change Drury Square, along with everything that's happening on Auburn Street and that amazing reconstruction and all the beautification that's going to happen with that. This is really going to change the look of Drury Square, and it's really going to be an economic development stimulator, I think. It may help even the mall redevelop that parcel that they've been looking to get a restaurant in on the parking lot site, because that parking lot site actually looks over toward the pond. So if we can make it look attractive, I think it's really appealing to a tenant to be coming in and using that. Likewise with Drury Square, with all the new things that we've put into place in Drury Square, and I think that over time, as the economy comes back, which it will. Once it comes back, I think we're going to see some different uses in Drury Square, or some expanded uses of existing businesses, which would be great for those existing businesses. So I think this is a real asset. So our plan, similar to the fire station, is to just present this to the public, have a couple of public meetings, and most importantly, as Ed said, we'll have to go to town meeting with some warrant articles this May, and that's our intent. If we get approval on those warrant articles, we intend to move forward with DPW and Bill Coyle to put together some RFPs and some bids and start getting this project underway. We'll have to go to Planning Board, Conservation Commission, and get all the required approvals, but we're really excited about this. So that's all I have. Through the chair, if you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you, Julie. It's a great sounding.
And I think you're muted still.
It's a great.
Muted.
It's a nice project, very nice project, and I appreciate all the information. Do any of our members have any questions? Kevin?
Just a quick question, Julie or Ed. What would your ideal timeline be for this project? Should all the permitting and approvals come into place? And secondly, the unexpended bond proceeds for the library, Windows HVAC, where those projects stand? I know they did the windows on the parking lot side of the building, but I don't believe the Southbridge side, which is probably the more expensive, those gigantic windows were replaced, but are still in need of it. Where does that stand? I understand you won't need to do the back half of the building if the room is extended there, but what about those other windows?
I'm going to actually ask Jean and or Ed to comment on the windows and where the financing stands. I know the dollar amounts that Ed was talking about this is dollar amounts that are remaining after these projects have been completed. But go ahead, Jean. Hi.
Hi, thank you. The windows on the Southbridge side, I don't know that it's necessarily really urgent. They don't leak. Sorry, echoing. They don't leak, and there really isn't anything aesthetically wrong with them. So at this point, as far as I know, it's not in the capital budget. We could certainly put that back in. I think the priority was the back windows, but if we put the sunroom on, when you walk in the library, you walk straight back. So it's not really like a long tunnel. You can walk straight back, straight into the sunroom. So those actually there are more of those, and that was actually the major expense. So on the side of the building, it's probably not that urgent that we do that in the next few years. And I don't know if Ed has anything to add to that about, the funding.
So we have some concerns. There are certain rules and regulations that we have to abide by in terms of when we go out and borrow money. We have to expend those funds within a certain period of time. Failure to do so could result in what they call an arbitrage finding. We would have to pay penalties and fines for not actually earning it on that unexpended portion. So we have to do our due diligence and make sure that if those projects are not moving forward, that we have to repurpose those funds for another like project, and that's what we're doing here. So those funds are several years old. There is no plan on moving forward with those projects. This is the right thing to do. So if we didn't repurpose those for this addition, we would repurpose those for something else.
Thank you.
Really just the time frame for this project.
So, Kevin, it was a little hard. I heard some stats, but I think you're asking about the time frame for the project? Okay, so if we get approvals from town meeting in May, our intent would be to start on the design for Goddard Park and the bridge, and that could take some time. But simultaneously, we could move forward on the library addition. So we would put together, I would say probably the first step we do is we put together the RFP for the library. We're going to have to plan out the timing of this, but if we can get the library addition underway and then we can start to get the bridge design underway, those can run simultaneous to also putting out a bid for the park. So I would think that the whole project would probably take probably upwards of a year to a year and a half, depending on when construction could start. With the town meeting being in May, you may not be able to get too much construction in. Maybe you could get the library addition done this year. And if you get everything designed for the park and the bridge, you could probably start construction a year from now. But say about 18 months.
Thank you.
Thank you. Michael, question?
Would there be additional cost for like furniture, shelving? I'm assuming if we take out a whole wall, there are probably shelves up against it that would need to be either repurposed or replaced.
I can speak to that, except Julie disappeared, so I don't know if she said something. I should respond to that. You're asking about, I can add a little bit of information about the timeline for the library. Because it's not built on site, the next thing to do would be spend $5,000 to get a 3D model, which would sort of, if you're going to present at town meeting, that might be very useful because we'll actually see what it's going to look like. So they have kind of hard time frames. We make a decision by October, they build it over the winter. Technically, they could deliver that by next spring because we just have to build the foundation and, do all that. And then they just literally come with a crane and put it in. Naturally, it's not that easy. You're going to take the windows out and it's probably asbestos or something. But that time frame could really happen in late spring of next year. Okay. And I just caught the tail end of what you were saying about shelving. So did you have a question about that?
Yeah, Jean, can you just address whether you're going to need to have additional furnishing when if and when we get this addition on the map?
Yeah, I think that part of it depends on what we're actually going to use it for. We would want to have some furnishing because we really need more seating areas. So some of that could come from the library that's already there. Additionally, because we're in compliance with the state, there are state aid funds, and some of that could be used for furnishing. and probably movable dividers so that we can partition off part of the room to have some separate, meeting space and so forth. So there are funds from the state aid that we get annually that could be set aside for that. In addition to, I know they're trying to, get the Friends group up and running. When they can do some fundraising, they probably would want to allocate some of those funds for furnishing. As far as shelving, we probably wouldn't have shelving in that room because it's going to be all windows, so there really isn't room for shelving, unless we left some of the archways from between the windows, in which case you could make real good use of the other side of that and put like magazine shelving and so forth, which right now takes up a different area in the library. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for, tucking away a little shelving space and movable furniture and dividers and so forth that can really make the room very usable for a lot of different reasons.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions, members? I think we're all set. Julie, thank you for making that presentation. It does sound like it sounds like a nice project, and thanks for sending that information to us today. And we'll,
Thanks for the opportunity.
yeah, thank you. And we'll look forward to seeing those warrant articles when they come before us. Okay?
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Jean.
Thanks, Jean. All right, so,
John, John, you can take me off of shared, and I think it's going to go to Ed for the final presentation. So
Okay.
move that, Ed. Thanks, John.
thanks.
Do I have the right Ed? Ed K?
Yes,
It's go to Ed's cousin office.
yep.
Okay.
Okay, let me put this up.
Wow, that's a lot.
So, Madam Chair, do you want me to present the budget, or did you want to take any other items?
Maybe we should do the transfers, because we have some people waiting, and it would be nice to let them go, so we can take care of the transfers. Okay, thank you. So I'm looking at the first transfer. It's from the library, and the request is $20,000 to come from an administrative position, and it's going to buildings and grounds. The reason is partial funding for new boiler emergency requirement. Jean, do you want to tell us about that?
Sure. The money is in that. I had an administrator moved out of the area, so that position became open. We haven't filled it yet because then COVID came along and everything's kind of upside down, so the money is in there. The building, the boiler did become an emergency. It's just, we spent a lot of money on the boiler over the last couple of years. We now have a maintenance, annual maintenance, and they come twice a year, and hopefully we'll keep everything up to date a little bit more. But in the meantime, it just kind of reached its shelf life, and we really had to replace it. So the total cost was about $30,000, and the $20,000 could come from that budget since there's nobody in that position at this time. But that's funded for next year, so it doesn't really hurt anything.
Okay. Thanks, Jean. Members, do you have any questions? It's Kevin? Okay, do I hear a motion? I heard a motion from Kevin and a second from Ed to approve this transfer. And I got to do a roll call. Kevin, yes or no? Kevin, yes or no? Yes? Yes. Okay. Mike, yes or no?
Yes.
Ed Coleman?
Yes.
And Trevor?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So the transfer is approved. Thank you. The next transfer is for the fire department. Two transfers, both coming from the overtime account. The first one is amount requested $1,813.69 going to the deputy chief salary account. When there's no movement in the selectmen's meeting room, the light goes off. Thanks for putting that back on. All right, and then in that present balance in the overtime account is $223,431. Do I hear any questions on this, or do I hear a motion? Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Ed. All in favor? Let me do the roll call. Kevin? Yes. Ed?
Yes.
Okay. Michael?
Yes.
And Trevor?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. So the next transfer, also the fire department, coming from the overtime account. The amount requested $3,250 going into the educational stipend account, and its reason for transfer to cover deficit in account. I have a question for Mr. Kazanovich. Are these, or actually for Mr. Coleman, excuse me, our fire chief, are these transfers related to any contract settlements?
I'll answer for the chief.
Okay.
Yes, these are in regards to contracts.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So does anyone have any question on the educational stipend request, $3,250, or do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks, Ed. So let's go through the roll call. Kevin?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
And Trevor?
Yes.
Thank you. So both those transfers are approved. Thank you. The next transfer from the DPW Highway Department, the transfer is coming from wages full-time, which has a present balance of $56,778, and the amount requested is $250. And the reason for the request is the transfer is going to the drug and alcohol testing line, and these are because of DOT mandatory drug testing. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Ed. Let me go through the roll call. Kevin?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
And Trevor?
Yes.
Thank you, gentlemen. And our last transfer, no, our next to last transfer, excuse me, is coming from the reserve account, requested from the reserve account by the town clerk's office. Amount requested $371 going to the clerical line item. And does anyone have any questions, or do I hear a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
Thanks, Ed. So let's do a roll call vote. Kevin?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
And Trevor?
Yes.
Thank you. In our last transfer is from the Council on Aging. The transfer request is from the van driver's account. Amount requested $687 to go to the director's salary. Reason for transfer, bylaw employee increase resulting from the 1% COLA in fiscal year 2021. Do I hear a motion to? Thank you.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you. So let's go through the roll call. Kevin?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
And Trevor? And Trevor? All right, so, and I approve, so we basically have one abstention, and I approve it, yes. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And now, Ed, back to you for the budget presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to let the members know that this presentation was made Monday night at the Board of Selectmen's meeting, and they took a vote to transmit it to you. So this officially, I guess, begins the process for the Finance Committee to start its process. And with that, I have probably about a 10-minute presentation in summary form that will support the detailed recommendation that was submitted by town administration. So when we look at the summary page here, we are recommending appropriations of roughly $72.4 million, offset by projected revenue of $72.5 million, leaving an unobligated balance of of $92,080.96. This budget utilizes not all of 2.5, but it utilizes 92.44% of 2.5. We'd be utilizing or taxing the residents 2.31 out of 2.5. Now, I can tell you that when we present our budget, normally at the beginning of the year, we managed to whittle that down as we did for the current fiscal year. I think when we first came in, we were at 2.3% last year. We ended up not taxing our residents any portion of 2.5. So we're going to do our best to mitigate that. It's going to be difficult, and I'll explain why. First of all, I want to say our total appropriation over current fiscal year is up just shy of $1 million, a 1.39% increase. And our revenue projections are up almost 1.1 or 1.52%. So the difference between those two numbers is the 92,000 that I identified on the first slide. Here's why it's going to become difficult to come up with additional revenue to reduce that. So as you can see, our Chapter 70 numbers came in. Governor's numbers are going to give us an increase of about $72,000. If you look at the history over the last 5 years, we did pretty good in terms of Chapter 70. In some years, we received almost $1.1 million. Last year, we received $400,000. The fact that we're receiving only 72 puts pressure on filling that gap through taxation, through general taxation. The school enrollment numbers are down a little over 100, I've been told, by the school department. And it's down as a result of COVID-19. I think people, parents have decided they want to look at alternatives to Auburn for various reasons. I don't know if this is a permanent decline or whether this is just a spike because of COVID, but certainly it has a financial impact on Auburn. I'm not going to bore you and go through our recommendations. These are in your book, but these are the appropriations that we're recommending. Once again, totaling $72,413,463. When we look at level of increase by department, we have to factor in the cuts that we absorbed at the fall town meeting. We backfilled those cuts, in most cases, all but OPEB and roadway reconstruction. So we cut $1.3 million out of the budget. We knew we had to do something to deal with COVID-19. We knew we were going to have a revenue loss, and quite honestly, it paid dividends because we had a free cash increase of $2 million. So I think our early action allowed for a net gain in our free cash, allowed the use of that free cash in the current year's budget. But if you look at the increases across the board, the two highlighted amounts, if you look at the blended town, which is from moderated down to fire, and we factor in the amount we backfilled that we cut at the fall town meeting, those departments are realizing about a 2.82% increase. If you look at schools, it's about a 2.85. So there's some parity there. If you look down bottom line, there's our 1.39% increase over current fiscal year. Here's our revenue sources. As you can see, tax levy, we have new growth estimated at $450,000. There's our 2.5 increase of roughly 1.2 million. All of our available funds are identified, totaling 1.648 million. Our cherry sheet state aid, that's the governor's numbers. Certainly we anxiously await the House numbers and the Senate numbers. We don't know how much different they're going to be. But that's the governor's numbers, 14.9 million, and our local receipts just shy of 10 million. And here's our projections for local receipts. We are carefully watching our meals and our hotel motel, which took a hit during COVID. Come back slightly, but certainly not to the extent that we realized during pre-COVID. This is something that we may have to adjust leading up to town meeting. So when we look at our budget recap for FY22, our revenue is $72,505,544.76. That leaves an unobligated 2.5 balance of $92,000, roughly $81. Once again, tax levy utilization for this recommendation is 92.44, and once again, that's 2.31 out of 2.5. Offset by our expenses of $72,413,463.80. And we put together a list of budget objectives and concerns based upon our review with the departments. I'm going to quickly go through the priorities and objectives. We would like to replenish our roadway reconstruction. That was part of the $1.3 million cuts. That has not been done in this recommendation. Nor has the $500,000 in OPEB annual funding through tax levy. That was stripped away at the fall town meeting as well. There was a need identified to add additional funding to the senior center for a program and activity coordinator. There is partial funding in the budget of roughly a little over $6,000. Right now, there are no activities currently ongoing at the senior center due to COVID-19. We don't expect that to resume in the near future. There was an ask for a shared clerical position in fire and DDIS. There was a half a clerk's position requested from the treasurer collector's office. That is not part of our request. We're going to continue to make an effort to bring tax rate equity back to Auburn. We've worked on that over a number of years. That is a priority that we are going to continue to address. We will continue to monitor our new growth. We believe that $450,000 right now may be conservative. We have a lot of activity ongoing within the community that hopefully will put us over that amount. Certainly, that's one area we can look at reducing our level of taxation if our new growth comes in higher. We want to continue to maintain our healthy reserve accounts and our stabilization accounts. And I can tell you that this budget does allow or does recommend an increase in our trash fee. We know an increase in tonnage because of COVID. We're upside down. Our revenue is not covering our costs, so that's something we are going to bring before the Solid Waste Committee and address in this budget cycle. Some of the other concerns, certainly we keep an eye on our COVID-19 impacts on our operations as well as our revenue collections. We know we have pending litigation costs that is of some concern. Our group health insurance renewal just came in. When I prepared this presentation, we did not know what that increase is. The increase is 11.2%. Now, I can tell you the budget recommendation provides for an increase of 6%, is roughly a 5% delta. But we're going to look at creative ways to mitigate that. We do have a healthy $10 million plus self-insured trust balance. We may be looking to leverage a portion of that against the increase to minimize that impact on our operational budget. Certainly our blanket insurance coverage renewal, that happens in June. We don't know what that is now, but we did provide for an increase. We're always concerned about a downturn in local, state, and federal government that has an impact on operations and our budget. We know we had an increase in our veteran services benefits. That could change very quickly. We reduced that somewhat, but only to the extent that our benefits are running at and annualize that cost and added some. So we believe we're okay right now. Continued certainty regarding unemployment costs. We're keeping an eye on that. And once again, our solid waste recycling and disposable costs during the pandemic have escalated. Our tonnage is up. Hopefully that will come back down once people return to work and our students return back to school full time. Our reduction in hotel, motel, and meals revenue, we modified that somewhat, but we're going to keep an eye on that. And once this unanticipated sped cost is always a concern every year, but we keep communications open with the school department. They let us know if costs with outside places need to be done. And we also have to expand stabilization about $489,000. So we do have a backstop, but that can evaporate very quickly when a number of placements are made. In terms of long-term costs beyond the current fiscal year, we continue to monitor our EPA stormwater mandates. Certainly, that's a federal mandate that we have to adhere to. Our agents for infrastructure, we try to address through our CIP by increasing that. Although we've had a number of main breaks that are very costly. So we need to come up with a long-term financial plan in dealing with the replacement and upgrading of our infrastructure. The formulation of a financial plan, if in fact the public safety facility is approved by the voters in the community and a debt exclusion vote is approved by the voters, we have to structure our debt in such a way that is palatable and is affordable as best we can. And certainly, our labor contracts are up at the end of fiscal 2022. So certainly beyond that, we are always concerned about labor costs and how that impacts the operational side of the budget. So with that, Madam Chair, that concludes my presentation. I don't know if you want to open it up for questions, but certainly I don't know if the members have had time to review the packets that were provided to them. Just to let you know, we did notify the departments and ask them in the coming weeks what would work best for them in terms of scheduling hearings before the Finance Committee. We'll try to meet those dates for those individuals that may have limited flexibility. But we will get those to you, and we'll try to structure a schedule that works for all.
All right, thank you very much, Ed. So does anyone have any questions about the presentation that Ed just showed us?
And I do have a quick one, and I know it's been a long meeting, so it's going to be quick. Had a nice job with the quick review, but the one that jumped out at me and kind of surprised me was the health insurance. I would have thought in a year that people weren't leaving home, weren't having elective surgery, weren't falling down ski slopes and breaking bones.
Muted.
If anything, we would have seen a savings in health insurance. Do they give reasons behind it, numbers behind it?
Unmuted. Muted.
Mike. Kevin, I caught most of what you said, and you went blank at the end, but let me tell you, you are correct. A lot of people, that's why the rates are going up, because they believe due to COVID-19, people are going to start going back to their primary care physician. They held off elective surgeries. All of that is now going to hit in FY22, and that's why the projections are that the claims and the costs are going to go up. So we are running right now this year, because of exactly what you said, our ratio of cost is down. We're running at a surplus. But they believe if things start opening up, that's going to turn around. So we don't know if that's a one-time spike, or whether or not that is going to maintain that level of increase for a period of time until we catch up. We just don't know.
Okay. Thank you. I understand that it's, the frustrating. They're not giving us credit for the issue where they didn't have many claims, I don't believe. But they're going to penalize us in the future because we didn't use the service.
Well, the good thing about that is because we have our self-insured trust, we feed it as though we're on a premium basis, but we only pay for actual claims. So there is a benefit as a result of COVID-19 and limited activity. It should result in a boost in our trust. That surplus should stay in the trust.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
Okay, Michael, question? No? Any other questions?
Unmuted.
Ann seems to be frozen. Does anybody else have any questions?
And I think we can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. So any questions, Michael or Ed or Trevor?
Oh, I'm good. No, not at the moment.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thanks a lot, Ed. I appreciate the presentation. So let's talk about what we need to do for the budget. We have to set up some meetings for the next coming Wednesdays. And we're going to find, what I'd like you to do is tell me if there are any Wednesdays that you won't be able to come to a meeting. You can email me that so we know. And then Sharon is speaking to the department heads to have them come in, the large department heads who usually come in to answer it so we can hear their budget presentation. If there's anyone that you want to make sure to see outside of, say, fire, police, school, DPW, library, Council on Aging, okay? I don't know if I can think of any more. If you want to see anyone out of that to come in to present their budget, please let us know. One of the things we need you to do, too, is look at the smaller departments in the budget that we will just be able to approve at our next meeting. So if you get a chance to review it, certainly, for instance, the reserve fund, the moderator's account, things like that. Okay? But I would plan on meeting definitely for the next few Wednesdays, and I'll talk to Sharon about when it has to be officially done so it can go to the printers. We're going to have to take a look at the warrant and go through that also after it closes and gets approved by the Board of Selectmen. Okay.
So, Madam Chair, I think we did get some feedback from the schools, because I know they're having meetings as well. And Sharon, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they expressed that they would like to come in on March 17th.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct, Ed.
All right, March 17th. That sounds good. All right, any other questions regarding the budget or any meetings coming up? You received the minutes from our December 9th meeting. Does anyone have any questions about the minutes? All right. Okay, hearing no questions, they're accepted as read, and of course we can always go back to them later if anyone has any concerns. All right, what else, what other questions do you have this evening? Nothing? No? All right, well, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you, Ed. And all in favor? Kevin?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
And Trevor?
Yes.
And me. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.